Next up, we have Drew Simon talking about crypto altruism. How you doing, Drew? How's your day going?
Hey, great, great. Very good so far. How about yourself?
Things are going very well. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, my absolute pleasure. I'm so excited to be here to talk about just the way that Web3 tools can be used to do good and to drive social impact.
Excellent. Well, the floor is yours. If you want to share your screen, please go ahead, and I'll be here if you need any support.
Sounds good. Well, thank you so much. And I didn't bring any visuals today. I was just going to kind of talk, and hopefully there'll be some time at the end for questions as well. But first of all, I want to take a moment, of course, to thank the folks at Metagame, MetaFest 2, for inviting me. I've been following along for some of the talks that have happened so far, and it's going to be hard to follow up from that, but I'm going to try my best. And I'm really going to be focusing today on how Web3 can be used to drive real, meaningful social impact. And I really believe that Web3 will change the world for the better, not to use too much hyperbole, but hopefully by the end of this session, you'll agree with me on that. There's just so many extraordinary use cases, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that and what I'm doing at Crypto Altruism to explore those a bit more. So to start things off, I want to tell you a little bit more about me, because I think that kind of leads in nicely to how I got here and the inspiration behind the work that I'm doing, and how I got into this wild world of Web3. So my background is in the traditional social impact world. I have worked for a number of nonprofits as an executive, board member, and advisor. I currently do some work as a consultant for a number of charitable organizations. And through my work, I began to get frustrated with what I saw as some pain points in the space that just weren't being addressed and that were causing some real challenges for the sector. So first, there simply was not enough funding. The space was hyper competitive, and funding that was available, while sparse, often had a lot of strings attached to it. And there simply wasn't enough ways for nonprofits to diversify their funding as well. Second, there was a clear lack of transparency, and a lack of transparency in how donor funds were being spent, how decisions were made, and how organizations were governed, which was really impacting donor trust. Third, there was a lack of community agency and ownership, especially from those the organization was serving, the clients or beneficiaries. Many nonprofits are highly centralized, where a select few individuals drive key decision making, which just isn't working. And finally, there's a clear lack of innovation. And nonprofits are highly risk averse and are hesitant to innovate and engage with new technologies such as Web3. They're stuck in this mindset of doing things because that's the way they've always been done, even if there was a better way of doing it. So why is this all a problem? Well, the world is changing really, really, really fast. And I'm sure we can all identify with that in Web3, where it feels like every day is an eternity with how quickly things are moving and changing. And these organizations are simply failing to keep up, putting them at risk of failure and failing those they serve in the process. So a couple years back, a friend of mine introduced me to cryptocurrency, and I was immediately interested, not so much from an investment point of view and more the technology behind it. So as I dug a bit deeper and fell down the rabbit hole, so to speak, as I'm sure many of you folks listening did as well, I began seeing some of the ways that technology behind crypto could be used to do real good and to drive meaningful change. But nobody was talking about this. Like, you could not find it anywhere of the good of crypto, of blockchain. What was being said about crypto and blockchain is what I'm sure many of you folks have heard before, and that wasn't so flattering. It's only used by scammers and criminals. It's a big Ponzi scheme. It has no value, no intrinsic value or worth. It's terrible for the environment, and it's run by a group of shadowy supercoders, right? So there's a lot of these kind of fear mongering around the space. This was at odds with what I was seeing in reality, which was individuals and communities using this technology to address complex social problems. So I was bringing these ideas to nonprofits, trying to evangelize them about the power of blockchain for good, but they were hesitant, to say the least, echoing many of the same criticisms and talking points that I just mentioned. So I made it my mission to help bridge the gap to the world of Web3 for those in the social impact space by elevating the many amazing ways blockchain can be used for good. And the end result was Crypto Altruism, which I created about a year ago. So since then, I've had the privilege of interviewing over 30 pioneering changemakers in Web3, hearing their stories of how they're using the incredible technology for good, and releasing over 50 podcast episodes, over 160 blog posts, doing some consulting with nonprofits interested in getting involved, and meeting a lot of amazing changemakers and community members along the way. So we've talked a little bit about the pain points and what got me here, which I think is important to kind of lead into this next piece about how blockchain and Web3 will address these four pain points, which are, of course, lack of funding, poor transparency, lack of community engagement and ownership, and hesitancy to innovate. So probably you don't know this, but there are some 1.5 million nonprofits in the United States alone, which is insane. That, of course, accounts for more than just charitable organizations or 501c3 organizations, but also includes things like churches and some interest groups and stuff like that. But for the purpose of this, I'm going to focus on the hundreds of thousands of charities that exists in the United States and around the world. So I want to first talk about the first pain point, which is a lack of funding and how Web3 can address this. So the obvious answer is cryptocurrency donations. So in fact, crypto donations are growing at an incredible pace, and I'm sure you've seen many stories in the news about the different ways that crypto donations have been used to support different charitable organizations, with an estimated $300 million US in crypto being donated to charitable causes each year. And crypto donors are incredibly generous. And to demonstrate this, I want to do a bit of a kind of just little mind exercise right now activity to get you to really kind of understand the scope of this generosity in the space. So the nonprofit industry average donation size, so talking like fiat currency donations, made by credit card or cash. And so this is the average donation that nonprofits would receive from a single act of transaction of donating is roughly 130 US. So in your head, I want you to guess what the average crypto donation size is. And this was very surprising to me. So according to data from this past Giving Tuesday in November from the Giving Block, the average crypto donation was 98.4 times higher, or roughly 12,600 US. So absolutely massive in terms of the scope of these individual donations. Another study found that almost half of cryptocurrency owners, those who held some sort of cryptocurrency, donated 1,000 or more to charity in 2020, compared to only about a third of the investor population as a whole. So all this goes against the narrative of crypto donors being self-serving or scammers or criminals, because a lot of folks are using crypto to support really important causes. A more recent example of this, of course, of this generosity can be found in the Web3 community's response to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Since the beginning of the crisis, large amounts of crypto have quickly made their way to humanitarian organizations working on the ground and even directly to the government itself. To date, somewhere around 150 million US worth of crypto has been donated to Ukraine. And what's really exciting is most of this is on chain, so it can be verified and you can see who it went to and how much went to them. Crypto giving can also be highly cost effective, with many traditional charitable giving platforms, those kind of middlemen for accepting crypto donations, taking as much as 15% in donation fees. Then you got the 1.5 to 3.5% charged by credit cards, and then there's payment processors. This means that less goes to charity and more goes to these big corporations. So crypto can help bring these costs down by cutting out these unnecessary intermediaries that just kind of take a piece of the pie but don't really provide a whole lot of value. So accepting crypto donations can also help expand an organization's reach globally and open them to new donor demographics. There are few communities and you've probably seen this, that are truly as globalized as Web3. And I like to use the Chainalysis Global Crypto Adoption Index as a kind of reference point for this to show this, in that every continent but Oceania and of course Antarctica have representation in the top 20 list of crypto adopting countries. So it is something that's really being used all over the world and adopted very quickly all over the world. But beyond just accepting cryptocurrency donations, which is just one small piece of the puzzle, there are many other creative ways that organizations can use Web3 tools to fundraise for their nonprofits. NFTs is a great one, of course, as well. So the number of organizations that have used NFTs to raise funds is growing at a rapid pace. And this includes organizations as big as UNICEF, which is one of the largest nonprofits in the world. Some charities have released their own drops or been beneficiaries by partnering with a project and being written into their smart contract to receive a portion of the funds. But what's truly amazing, and what I think is a game changer when it comes to NFTs, is this idea of perpetual charity, that nonprofits can receive a portion of secondary sales in perpetuity, which can help them develop that kind of passive revenue source that simply didn't exist before, opening up to a whole new way to generate revenue. There have also been some social impact projects that have experimented with their own currencies with a portion of funds from each transaction supporting a cause. I think the overarching point here is that there are so many exciting and novel ways that nonprofits can make use of Web3 technology to help with their fundraising efforts, which is why thousands of charities are already using it, including Médecins Sans Frontières or Doctors Without Borders, the American Cancer Society, which actually just recently met their $1 million goal to support a new project for cancer research, Feeding America, and over 1,000 other charities. But if you think about it, thousands, I'm saying thousands, versus the hundreds of thousands, millions of charities that exist around the world, it's still super early, and it's still something that's not being adapted at a well, it is being adopted at a rapid pace, but there's still a long way to go. When I think about crypto donations, I like to think about it, looking at it as that it's a matter of if, not a matter of if, but when charities are going to need to get on board with this. So I read a book recently called Bitcoin and the Future of Fundraising by Ann Connolly and Jason Shim, which I highly recommend, by the way. And they use the example of credit card donations. So if you go back decades, individuals were terrified of the potential of entering their credit card information online, and many nonprofits were slow to accept credit card donations as a result. Then when credit cards were adopted at a rapid pace for online payments, many nonprofits were slow to react and missed out on potential donors who this was their preferred method of payment. In a sense, I think cryptocurrency will be viewed very similarly, but with much broader implications. Not only does it have the benefit of connecting organizations with this new and exciting and very generous donor base, in which hundreds of millions of donations are being made, including major gifts in the millions and even billions, as we saw with Vitalik's donation of over $1 billion in support of COVID relief in India. But it also opens them to exciting new technology with use cases that go beyond simply accepting financial contributions. So the second pain point that I talked about earlier was a lack of transparency. There's been a breakdown in trust between nonprofits and the public, unfortunately, in recent years and decades. And before I dive into that more, I want to start the section off with a little quote from Sergey Nazarov, the founder of Chainlink. And it goes, I quote, "A cryptographic truth is a superior way for the entire world to operate. Once you experience the transparency, personal control, and lower risks of a world powered by truth, rather than a world backed only by just trust us ideas, you simply cannot go back." We have unfortunately seen cases of fraud, misappropriation of funds, embezzlements, you name it, in the nonprofit sector in recent years and decades. It's important to note, of course, that the vast majority of charities do amazing, honest work and are great stewards of donor funds. But unfortunately, it only takes a couple bad apples to impact public perceptions, which has certainly happened. Transparency is one of the core values of Web3, and as such, most cryptocurrencies by their very nature are highly transparent, easily auditable. This makes it much easier for donors to see how much crypto is going to a charity, which can help them hold the charity accountable. If they're seeing a certain amount of funds go in, but not seeing the end results that they expect, it helps ensure that and hold the charity accountable to putting the money to good use on meaningful projects that are doing real good. In a future world where the vast majority of donations are made through transparent cryptocurrencies, it can really go a long way in helping rebuild this trust that's broken down. As donors can now know for certain how much in crypto is each charity is bringing in and the impact it translates to, and can hold them to that. For generations that grew up with the internet and social media, transparency is important. It's for most of our lives, for me at least, I've had access to any information I wanted with the click of a few buttons. And so transparency is personally important to me, as it is to the emerging generations as well, who will be the big donor base of tomorrow. So these are the donors of tomorrow, and if nonprofits don't get on board with the importance of transparency, they will risk losing them, and that's a big role that Web3 can play. So some organizations have begun experimenting with new on-chain donation mechanisms, so donors know exactly how funds are being spent and how much is coming in. And I believe that this will be the norm in the future, because nonprofits will be held to a higher standard and will have to adopt to this. So by creating mechanisms through, let's say, DAOs, where community members can vote on key organizational decisions, is another way that can help increase transparency and accountability, which leads into the next point, which was the third pain point I highlighted at the beginning, which is a lack of community ownership and engagement. So I'm just going to adjust my mic here. I just realized it's a bit far away. So most nonprofits are heavily centralized, and this is not something new. This is the way it has always been. While there are efforts being made to bring about decentralization through boards elected by membership or annual general meetings or community consultations, they often fall short. Most nonprofits are led by an executive team or board making big decisions that substantially impact those they're serving, even if they're thousands of miles away. This is an issue that, as the organization may not fully understand the needs of the community they are serving. So let's say there's a rural and remote region in sub-Saharan Africa that lacks access to basic education. So a well-intentioned nonprofit sends some volunteers over to build schools in the region, but surprisingly, they find that once they build the schools, nobody shows up, despite the region having a very large school-age population. What this nonprofit failed to recognize was that the vast majority of this population, let's say in this example, are subsistence farmers, and that the community relies on the school-age population to provide support on the farms during the day so that they can simply survive. So a better solution would be the nonprofit working with the community to resolve this root challenge, as opposed to spending all this time building schools that won't be utilized. And so where Web3 can help address this is by creating new ways to engage the community, including those being served, in governance and decision-making. And the most obvious example is, of course, DAOs, right? Which I know has been a big theme of this conference so far. So DAOs create amazing opportunities for individuals to participate in movements of change that simply didn't exist before, and for them to take ownership over causes important to them or causes directly impacting them. So we've seen a number of social impact DAOs and Web3 projects emerge in recent years that are using community governance and tokenization to drive their mission. One example I like to use is Impact Market, which is a decentralized poverty alleviation protocol that allows communities to take ownership over universal basic income programs in their communities. So programs that they can implement in, let's say, a refugee settlement or a remote region that provides some sort of guaranteed basic income to community members. In the past, these programs have traditionally been governed and administered by centralized bodies, often on the other side of the world. But what Impact Market does, which is why I love this organization so much, is that they allow communities to be the managers of their own UBI programs. They make their own decisions over how funds are distributed, ensuring they go to those in need most. They know the challenges of their own communities way better than those thousands of miles away, and can adapt to that and make sure that the programs that they're offering serve those more appropriately. So I think that that's just one really exciting example of one of the ways that DAOs are being used and decentralization is being used to make sure that community members have more ownership over the projects that are impacting and the services that are impacting them. And the final pain point that I spoke about earlier was a lack of innovation. So nonprofits are historically incredibly risk averse. And this makes sense because they need to be responsible stewards of donor money and are hesitant to engage with new technologies and ways of doing things because there was always the risk of how it could impact their funding and their perceptions in the community. And, think about it, right? If there's a nonprofit that wants to engage with cryptocurrency and Web3, a huge barrier to them can be those stigmas and those points that I mentioned above of that seeing in the news that it's only for scammers and criminals and thinking about how that could alienate their donor base, right? So that is a barrier. And that's another reason that a lot of them are hesitant to engage. But there is a real consequence to this because the end result is organizations are being stuck in perpetual cycles of doing things the way they have always been done, as opposed to doing them the best way and the most efficient way and the way that's going to deliver the most value to community members. An example of this could be an organization that provides, let's say, direct financial aid to victims of natural disasters. The aid could take days to weeks to get to them as it goes through slow bureaucratic intermediaries like banks. On top of this, the intermediaries may take a substantial cut of the funds, meaning less gets to those in need, and more goes to often large corporations whose executives may be making millions. Alternatively, imagine a world where this aid was provided like instantly via cryptocurrency in, let's say, the form of a stable coin at a fraction of the cost and getting to the beneficiary way, way faster. Instead of taking days to weeks for the funds to get there, it could take seconds to minutes. And not to mention, it would all be on chain as well. So theoretically, they can cut out the costly and time-consuming bureaucratic practices of monitoring the funds and auditing to ensure that the funds went to who they should have, when they should have. This information would now conveniently all be on chain, making it easily auditable and transparent, helping again with that rebuilding of trust. Another example could be a massive food bank that expands extensive resources on, let's say, tracking mechanisms to monitor their food supply chains. Many of these large food security organizations or food banks have extensive supply chains behind them of food making their way to the front line to serve those in need. But supply chains are often highly wasteful. And in fact, as much as 30% of food in supply chains can go to waste due to supply chain failures. So how can blockchain help address this? I like to look at cold chains as an example. So what cold chains are supply chains of products that must remain refrigerated or frozen. So let's say that there is a food product that must be kept at a certain temperature or else it will spoil or go to waste. In the supply chain, a refrigerated container, let's say with a device to monitor temperatures, could record any unsafe temperatures or fluctuations and automatically record it to the blockchain. This could help the food bank more quickly address temperature issues, helping reduce spoilage and ensuring more of the food goes to those in need. So to share a real life example of actually how this is being done today, because it is, there's many amazing projects that are using blockchain to improve supply chains. I'm going to use the example of Walmart. And I know I hate to do this because I'm not the biggest fan of Walmart, but it does serve as a good example, I think, of the power of blockchain to improve supply chains. So previously, it could take as long as, in the case of Walmart, 7 days to get specific data on food in Walmart supply chains, which is crazy. However, with the increasing need to monitor for foodborne illnesses, for example, and disease controls in food supply chains, 7 days is too long. It just doesn't cut it. So to help address this, Walmart teamed up with IBM and makes use of their what's called their Food Trust platform built on Hyperledger blockchain to more efficiently gather food data. So now with this blockchain-based platform, they're able to gather the same data, which once took 7 days, in just over 2 seconds. So 7 days to 2 seconds to gather this vital information. It's truly incredible. So this could really help cut down on waste by making sure information is available to the food banks so they can address issues in their supply chains. Smart contracts can also be used to ensure greater efficiency in this example. Let's say the food bank distribution center receives a large shipment of canned soup from a provider. And when the product is scanned at the distribution center, it automatically triggers a payment to the provider, cutting out the need for a bank or any individual to give the stamp of approval. Less intermediaries, of course, means less costs, as there are fewer actors taking a cut of each transaction. So all in all, Web3 technology has the potential to drastically improve the efficiency of nonprofit operations, really allowing them to deliver their services at a fraction of the cost, cutting through traditional bureaucratic systems that slow things down, and eliminating the need to just go through so many costly intermediaries. So on a note of innovation, I want to touch more broadly on some of the key areas where I've really been seeing innovation in Web3 through my conversations with change makers and through my research, and where I believe there'll continue to be these massive positive disruptions. And it mostly pertains to historic institutions that have inhibited progress for decades. And I'm going to share a Vitalik quote to sum this up. And it goes, if crypto succeeds, it's not because it empowers better people, it's because it empowers better institutions. And I think that this is vital. One of the most inspiring aspects of Web3 is how to disrupt traditional, often highly bureaucratic and centralized institutions. And I want to use the examples of DeFi, ReFi, and DeSci. And I apologize for the acronyms. I'm obviously fond of them, as many in the Web3 space are. We have a lot of them. When it comes to DeFi, I think it speaks for itself. Decentralized finance has the opportunity to drive greater financial inclusion for 2 billion people who are unbanked around the world, who lack basic access to those financial services, decentralized insurance, all these different things that can really help those in the emerging economies and help nonprofits deliver their services as well. Looking at basic financial services, for example, could help that UBI, Universal Basic Income provider, make sure the funds get to those in need, as they now have access to financial services, which they didn't before. So they might have had to rely on paper money, for example, and giving out cash, which can really slow things down. So that's one use case there from the DeFi point of view. And I'm just really excited about a world where big bloated financial institutions are no longer needed and no longer determine who has access to these services that are really preventing them from getting the support they need. ReFi is another amazing one in helping us, so regenerative finance, and helping us fight climate change, an area that has traditionally been in the hands of governments around the world. And as we've seen, it hasn't gone well. Thanks to Web3, individuals can now play a larger role in driving climate actions. And a good example of that is ClimateDAO, which I believe is speaking at this conference later on, where a community has come together to develop a carbon-backed digital currency. And to date, it has absorbed nearly 18 million tons of carbon, which is the equivalent of about 88,000 hectares of forest, nearly 4 million cars annually, and over 500 million liters of gasoline. Actions like this, where individuals could contribute to this sort of project and have that level of impact, simply wasn't possible before and was reserved only for massive institutions and governments. And then, of course, there's DeSci, or decentralized science, which is an area that I think excites me perhaps the most. And it's putting scientific research and developments in the hand of the community, as opposed to certain gatekeepers like scientific journals, traditional educational institutions, or big pharma. And I think that this will be a game changer. While each of these institutions has their place in society, they can also inhibit progress by creating unnecessary red tape and bureaucracy. So since the beginning of the DeSci movement, which is relatively new, we've seen projects emerge. Like an example I like to use, and great organization which I have on my podcast, is Crowdfunded Cures. And they're using the power of decentralization to drive the development of public good medicines. So think off-patent drugs that have amazing use cases, but big pharmaceutical companies don't want to fund research because it's not profitable. Because they're off-patent, they can't make more money from it by being that exclusive provider of that drug. So I think the overarching point here, whether it's with the charitable sector or with social impact more broadly, is that Web3 has the potential to take old, bloated, and slow-moving institutions and sectors, and using this technology, bring greater efficiency and community ownership to them. So I want to finish the talk off today with one more quote, and I promise it's the last one. And I'm sure you can tell by now I love my quotes. But it's from Julie Sweet, the CEO of Accenture, and it reads, "Blockchain should be used to address opportunities and problems that lack easier answers." And in all the examples I've used above, and all the pain points I've discussed, blockchain can be used to address these challenges where, for decades, organizations and institutions have chosen the hard way of doing things because it's the way it has always been done, and it's not the best way of doing things. So I want to obviously end this with a caveat here, is that Web3 will be a game changer now and into the future, but it is not a panacea for all of the world's problems. It's not a fix-all. It's not a one-size-fits-all solution. But what I think it will do as I think it'll make addressing these problems a hell of a lot easier, which is, I think, the important point here. So that's all for me. A big thank you to the folks at Metagame MetaFest 2 for inviting me to speak today. Please don't hesitate to reach out, and I'll stick around and answer some questions for a few minutes as well. But my DMs are always open. My Twitter handle is crypto_altruism. Shoot me a message, or you can hit up cryptoaltruism.org to get in touch. And so thanks so much. And yeah, if there's any questions or anything, happy to take them.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Drew. Yeah, I definitely have firsthand felt this pressure too. And so I was part of an NFT project where we gave away the majority of the money to charity. We funded Gitcoin and Giveth, and then also we gave money to wipe away medical debt and directly wiped away families' debt. $7 million worth of debt was wiped away. And then because the charity took cryptocurrency, the online trolls came out and just ripped them a new one. Like, how could you be destroying the environment? And it's stuff that didn't really make any sense. And a lot of them look like fake accounts. So yeah, I definitely know that the resistance to kind of this change, but being able to meet people where they need help and support, and being able to support people directly rather than what some organizations prescribing is key. I think your example of the schools in a farm country where the kids aren't going to show up, it shows like the disconnect, right? It's like people being like, oh, I'm gonna fix this place, they're not going to school, I'll make a school. It's like maybe there's a reason that they weren't going to school, and just kind of doing something that someone's not asking for, you're not really solving a problem for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think directly meeting people where they need help and funding them through things like Gitcoin and quadratic funding, which goes a huge way as well, and has the transparency, is where we're going. So I definitely am 100% behind what you're saying. Can you tell me a little bit more about the organization? Do you guys do any kind of funding directly yourselves, or are you advocating for it?
Yeah, so what we do is one area where I saw a gap when I originally founded Crypto Altruism was that just around that kind of the narrative in the space, right? That there was a lot of good being done, but it wasn't being showcased or highlighted. We're only seeing the negatives. And, I saw that as something that really needed to be addressed, and that I could use my experience in the nonprofit sector and, through my writing and my storytelling to really address this. So what we do is we're primarily a content platform for elevating these use cases. So we interview change makers. We have a podcast and blog. We've had about 55 episodes and 160 blog posts, put out a number of resources, infographics, resources on crypto giving, all those sorts of things. Done some consulting with nonprofits as well to help onboard them into the space and make use of these tools for good. And we're growing at a rapid pace, of course. So that's a little bit about us. We're just getting kind of dipping our toes into playing more of an active role in fundraising and supporting charities that want to make use of Web3 to raise funds. But really our primary focus, which is our strength, is on the content side of things and helping change that narrative so that there's a one-stop shop that nonprofits that are interested in engaging in the space can go to say, oh, there's something special happening here. I'm seeing all this stuff in the news, but here's all the amazing use cases and ways that this technology is being used for good to help then bridge that gap and onboard them into the space.
Awesome. Yeah, because as you say, 90% of the people that I've engaged with are out there trying to help other people. They're supporting each other, and the Web3 community that we're part of is very much a builder and supportive community. So, thank you for helping bring those stories to life, because that's one of the hardest parts. Is we can build and we can do everything the right way, but if no one knows about it, we're helping people, but there's still the people that are speaking so negatively about all the stuff that we're doing that the noise it overrides a lot of the progress that we're making.
Absolutely.
So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And yeah, don't hesitate to get in touch. My DMs are always open. And Twitter again was crypto_altruism, or you can go to cryptoaltruism.org to get in touch.
Great. Thanks so much, Drew.
Thank you. Have a great day and enjoy your time.